This episode is brought to you by Portland Distro. If you love underground music and movies, go to portlanddistro.com for licensed shirts, vinyl, CDs, and more. Go to portlanddistro.com. Plug in the discount code MikeHill666 for 15% off at portlanddistro.com. Hello, friends, and welcome to this week's episode of Everything Went Black. Composer Chris Bozzone returns. A while back, Chris came on primarily to talk about Cadabra Records and the impending Nightlands Festival, which was an excellent event that took place in South Jersey and showcased some of the incredible stuff that's going on at Cadabra Records. If you like weird fiction and cosmic horror, gothic horror, that sort of thing, Cadabra Records is the place to go for scored narratives. It's spoken word with an incredible score. Chris does the lion's share of the work. And if you dig H.P. Lovecraft, Clark Ashton Smith, Robert Chambers, that sort of thing, that's the place for you. We take a bit of a deeper dive into Chris's background this time around. There's also some forthcoming Cadabra Records news that we talk about. And it was a great time. Chris is awesome. And definitely check out Cadabra Records and try to make it to some of the events that we talk about. After you're done listening to this, be sure to support the other Horsemen of the Podcasting Apocalypse shows. It's an elite Illuminati group focused on providing top-notch media for you guys out there. In a world of mediocrity, we stand opposed to that. Kicking off the week, we have Horror Wolf 666, brought to you by Brandon Legion. Tuesday, we have Into the Necrosphere, brought to you by Jackie Smith. Wednesday, of course, is Everything Went Black, the show you're listening to right now. Thursday, aka Necro Thursday, is the day that Necromaniac's horror podcast drops. Friday, we have Break the Apocalypse, which features my co-host, Mike Scandato's brother, John Draper. Saturday is a day off. Sunday, Carl Hikara comes at you with Soul Knox. And lurking in the recesses, Iblis Manifestations comes to you via the conduit of all, via Cheyenne of the incredible band Trivax. Cheyenne is too much of a free spirit to stick to a schedule, so he just fields the vibe of the universe and presents one of these shows to you whenever the stars align. If you want to support the show, aside from telling your friends about it, you can check us out on Patreon. For as little as $1 a month, you get bonus content. For $5 a month, you get early access to all of the regular stream shows. And for $25 a month, you can become a sponsor. You get one ad read a month. It could be on anything. You can do it for as long as you want. And that's the case for all of the other levels. You can do it for 1 month or for all eternity. Welcome back, Chris. It's great to hear from you again.
Thanks so much, Mike. Excited to be back.
Yeah, it's like every now and then I'm like, I have to get Chris back on. We had such a great conversation last time.
Absolutely. I'm really psyched to be back, and I agree. It was really fun.
And also having John Paget a couple weeks ago. That was kind of, I guess, the bridge to start us talking again about doing another episode.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you've been killing it lately. I've really been enjoying the show and assorted shows, everything from the great Paget discussion that people should definitely check out if they haven't already, to the recent True Detective dive in you did, and also on the other show, covering some really personal favorites of mine, such as Lamora and Let's Scare Jessica to Death, and a little before that, Messiah of Evil. So yeah, you've been offering so much great stuff to listen to lately.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. Actually, it's funny that you mentioned, Lamora, Messiah of Evil, and there seems to be this kind of grouping of films from that early 70s to mid 70s era that's kind of like the American Nightmare. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. I think, the best book on that I've read that is really a massive body of work is Stephen Thrower's Nightmare USA.
Oh,
and
damn. Okay.
It covers all of those films and so many more. I think it's, 600, 700 page book with so many great essays on that type of cinema. And it's really exhaustive and insightful and funny. And yeah, it's a really fantastic book, my favorite of its kind. And Stephen Thrower, of course, being the great writer who, penned the book on Lucio Fulci, Beyond Terror.
Yeah.
And then, a musician in his own right with such legendary groups as Coil and then later Cyclobe and so forth. So yeah, love Stephen Thrower's work.
Much to my chagrin, I have to say that I did not know of that book's existence, because just in the recent months of us talking, at the podcast talking about the American Nightmare, I'm like, man, someone should write a book about this stuff. And maybe I should write a book about these things. And I was like, damn, there's already an existing material out there.
Well, that doesn't mean you can't still write it. And
yeah.
I hope you do. That would be fantastic.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I have a bunch of different writing projects I got in the works right now, and that's stuff like that is definitely on the list. And you mentioned the True Detective thing. That actually sprang from an essay that I wrote, which at some point I'll probably publish either online or try to collect it somewhere. And there's a part 2 to that show that's only on our Patreon, which covers more of the philosophy and literary connections to that first season.
Excellent. Yeah. Well, I listened to the initial episode and it was really thorough and made me want to revisit the show for sure.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk. There's a bunch of stuff going on, either with Cadabra Records, which you're an integral part of, and also with your own musical endeavors with the Seer and the record that came out recently, and an upcoming live event, which we're weeks away from. So we had the Nightlands Festival earlier this year. So this thing that's happening at the end of September is kind of like an abbreviated version of that, it seems.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really exciting. Jonathan had the great idea Jonathan Dennison, the founder and label head of Cadabra Records, to start a new series that will be part of the ongoing Cadabra subscriptions, and a new kind of line of records that is going to be called Haunt. And the first Haunt record will be Charles Baudelaire's Flowers of Evil. And that record has already been recorded, and it's one of my personal favorites of recent times. So it's I want to say about 15 or 16 Baudelaire poems from the collection of Flowers of Evil. And Lawrence R. Harvey read it, and I did the soundtrack for it. And that isn't a live record, but some of the forthcoming Haunt records will be live recordings in the music studio that I work out of. And that's called Retro City Studios in the Germantown section of Philadelphia. And basically, there's going to be these series of shows on Saturday, September 30th, the last day of September, and then the first day of October, Sunday, October 1st. And on the 30th, I'll be working with Robert Lloyd Perry, who, him and I have performed The Willows and Count Magnus by M.R. James, The Willows with Algernon Blackwood, of course, by Algernon Blackwood. And that was done at Nightlands. And we'll be doing a live recording version of The Willows that evening and on the 30th. And then also Maupassant's The Horla. And that's going to be recorded specifically live for this new Haunt series. And then on Sunday, October 1st, Anthony D.P. Mann will be performing Robert W. Chambers' The Mask, and then also selected poetry by Edgar Allan Poe. And again, those performances will be recorded for future live Haunt series records. So it's really cool because these are intimate live performance events that not only serve as a kind of unique bird's eye view into the recording process of a Cadabra record being performed in front of you that will be an actual forthcoming record, but also, in the studio in which the soundtracks are recorded when I'm doing the soundtracks and so on and so forth. So it's a beautiful studio, and the acoustics are just phenomenal, and there's a really good speaker system. So we did one with John Padgett last summer for Thomas Ligotti's The Clown Puppet, and also performed some Ligotti poems like I Have a Special Plan for This World and This Degenerate Little Town. And, it was a really phenomenal performance that John gave, and it was just so great to play the soundtrack live with him and have a pristine sounding recording from it. So we're really excited to continue this process and start this new Haunt series. And the Haunt series is really kind of throwing light on key titles within weird fiction and strange fiction, but ones that might not have the same mass appeal that you could warrant pressing 1,000 copies of or something like that. So these are more oddball titles for vinyl collectors, but really essential within the canon of weird fiction.
Yeah, that's killer. I will be at the October 1st show. The September 30th evening I will be attending at the Mayhem show out that night, so I will not be able to watch night one.
Yeah, well, I'm so glad that you'll be making the Sunday performance. That's awesome, and so glad that you're seeing something so cool the night prior. Is Mayhem playing their classic album, or is it kind of an overview? Is Attila going to be there and all that? I've kind of lost track of the latest.
Yeah, well, they're supporting Cannibal Corpse, so they're probably going to play maybe a 40-minute set that night.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I'll be. We got those tickets like a while back, and I was like, oh man, the first night of this event, the Haunt. But the cool thing is that the second day is The Mask by Robert W. Chambers, and that's one of the first 4 stories that makes up the King in Yellow collection. The Carcosa mythos.
Absolutely, yeah. Anthony and I were fortunate enough to do a really fun 7-inch a few years back called Carcosa, and it was the poems that are within the King in Yellow collection, and kind of bookended it with the intro of Casilda's song, the fictitious play that runs through the book and so forth. And I'm really glad to be returning to that text and doing The Mask, as I think it's a really beautiful and unusual tale that has a lot of kind of Poe connections in overarching ways. So I think it'll be a really great pairing that night with select Poe poetry. And, a lot of the poems that will be performed that evening will be some of the real classics within the Poe cycle of poems.
And just for some crossover, we were talking about the True Detective thing I did earlier. Now, a lot of that, there's like pieces of dialogue in that season of the show, specifically where they refer to black stars and that kind of stuff. That's actually out of I think the Casilda's one of the poems in there. That's actually dialogue that's lifted almost exactly from those pieces. Yeah,
there's a lot of kind of, I have to kind of refresh on it, but if I recall correctly, it's a lot of kind of patchwork of odds and ends from different bits and pieces.
Yeah, but heavily from that piece, like that, the King in Yellow, Casilda's song, I think it's what it's called. Yeah. Anyway, we're getting off topic here, but now the question about the Willows, at Cadabra, at the Nightlands Festival. That version that was performed was a slightly abridged version of the story, wasn't it?
Yeah. So Robert Lloyd Perry, he did an absolutely stunning job adapting that, because if you were to read it unabridged, it's about 2.5 to 3 hours.
Yeah.
That doesn't really lend itself to a live performance that most people would have the patience to sit through for the entirety of it. So he just kind of got to the core of the story. And, it's a story that has a very intentional pacing, and it goes back to a lot of recurring elements and so forth. So I think he did just a phenomenal job at getting to the heart of that story and the terror found within. So yeah, this version that we'll be performing again on the September 30th is approximately 55 minutes to an hour. We did a record version of it, a studio version that's coming out actually around that same time. With luck, it'll be in hand by the time of that show, and copies will have arrived, et cetera, of the full-length vinyl release. And I believe that clocks in around 55, 56 minutes.
So Robert actually went through this text and created a script based on that. That's what he did.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Robert is just stellar at, adaptations and his kind of own touches on classic weird fiction, whether it's M.R. James or The Willows by Blackwood in this instance. And also he's done that with Lovecraft as well, for some stories that he's performed all around Europe, and sometimes he travels the States as well.
I actually have that record in my my cart right now over at the Cadabra Records site.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I got 3 records in there right now. I got The Willows, which is a pre-order. Or maybe by the time I actually buy it, it might actually be available. But the Fabio Frizzi from the Archives Volume 1, and the Fabio Frizzi The Beyond Composer's Cut.
Oh yeah, those are all fantastic choices. The Archives one is a really fun record. It's everything from kind of prog rock jams to disco songs that are really fun. There's one particularly insanely catchy song that always gets in my head whenever, for days on end after I listen to it again. And then the Composer's Cut is just, absolutely legendary. A new rendition from a few years ago of Fritzi going back to the studio and kind of doing, you hear about the director's cut of a film, but this is kind of the composer's version of going back to a classic score. And he just did the same exact thing for Lucio Fulci's Zombie. And the recording just came out so beautifully and crystalline. And it's really an amazing addition to the Zombie catalog of the different iterations that have come out over time. So this is, to make clear, both the Beyond Composer's Cut and Zombie Composer's Cut, they're brand new versions, brand new studio recordings. And Zombie just came out. So
that was actually a follow-up question I had. So these are not existing recordings that he had in an archive somewhere. These are completely new versions of these songs. Is that correct?
Exactly.
Oh,
so, he's been touring for, I want to say, over 10 years now with a core group that's his Fritzi to Fulci group. And, they're touring around the world playing the classic Lucio Fulci scores and more, as Fritzi's career is so varied and just legendary. But he took his band that he's been working so closely with over the years back into his own studio to record new renditions that have, their own little touches and new elements and maybe you swap out an original synth part with a classical guitar line or vice versa. And yeah, they're just really perfect new versions. So, even if you're someone that's hardcore and has 3 or 4 versions of the original recordings, you don't have this because it's brand new.
Yeah, that's what I was leading up to. So anyone out there listening, if you're a Fabio Frizzi completist, this would be perfect for your collection then.
Absolutely. Yeah. Really great stuff. Some of my favorite records of recent years. And actually, Frizzi's and his band are playing in London at the end of October. I want to say it's October 28th, but I might be a day or two off. But him and his band are playing in London, a premiere of the new Zombie Composer's Cut set to the film. So with Beyond, he did an amazing tour where him and his band were playing full blast to the film. And then they would do a set of the Fritzi to Fulci things afterwards. And in London this October, the band is, I think, premiering the live version of Zombie Composer's Cut set to the film.
Now that Zombie Composer's Cut, that's out of stock right now, right? You guys are going to reprint?
Oh, is it?
I think so.
I don't know. Maybe not. But I think you might still be able to get copies.
There you go, man. You got to pick these up while they're hot.
That's right.
Yeah, that's since I don't have the Beyond in my hands yet, I looking forward to checking that out.
Yes, and both the Beyond and Zombie Composer's Cut, absolutely beautiful, extraordinary art by Jeremy Hush in both cases.
Yeah, I'm going to get Jeremy on the podcast as well at some point. He's aside from his artwork, he's got a ton of other extracurricular stuff going on that's interesting.
Oh yeah. Jeremy's just a phenomenal guy and artist, and I actually just bumped into him a week or so ago. A friend of mine was taking his dog on a walk to some dog park, and we bumped into Jeremy and Sophie doing the same with their dog and some of their friends.
I have to say, man, there's quite a few of the artists that provide artwork for these releases that are actually friends of mine. Like Jeremy, I've known him for years. Paul Romano, I've known him for years. Joe Kahnberger, he's someone that I've known him since like the mid 90s, actually. And it's really cool to see these guys like working on such cool projects.
Absolutely. Yeah. Jonathan is just unparalleled in the talent that he's able to pool together and get people to, band together to do things that have never been done before. And quickly going back to the Haunt series, I forgot to mention that we want this to be, and Jonathan envisions it to be, an ongoing series that goes beyond this fall and entering into spring of next year, and something that keeps happening over time as these, back at Retro City Studios, where I record out of. And the idea and what we hope for in the spring is that Lawrence R. Harvey will come to the studios and we'll do a new set of the Haunt records during that time.
That's awesome. So this, the studio, let's what kind of setup is over there? It's like, that's where you record all of this work aside from the live setting. So how does that work exactly?
Yeah, well, I was really lucky in that a few of my childhood friends growing up, they're all musicians, and we're all very close still all these years later. And they started a studio in around 2008 and in Germantown, Philadelphia. And they killed themselves to make it top of the line studio. And, a lot of big recording artists go there over time, et cetera. And I've just had access to it through knowing everybody that originally founded it. And one of the founders is one of my closest collaborators and friends, Barry Knob. And he performed with me at all of the Nightlands shows, the full day shows at Nightlands this June. And Barry's produced every single thing that I've done of value, whether it's, you know, the Cadabra soundtracks and then the other works that I do. And he also helps out with a lot of brilliant arrangements and so forth. So, you know, Barry and I have a really close working relationship where we've been doing this for so long, recording together, that I don't really have to say much to him, and vice versa, because there's kind of this psychic understanding when we're working. And that's kind of what I prefer, because, you know, when I'm in the studio, I just want to kind of get things done and be a workhorse. I don't really want to talk about it or think about it, because so much of it is working off of instinct after already doing stuff.
Yeah, not having to deal with the technical aspect of recording is always a plus when you're trying to make an album or, you know, compose a piece of film music or something like that.
Absolutely. You know, I found that for me, doing the tech stuff and worrying about that just put it over the edge for me in terms of it being anxiety ridden. So the fact that I can just focus on the performance and what I want to do with instrumentation and so forth, it just takes such a load off.
Do you have a background in production at all? That's something I've never actually asked you about, is like your background and, you know, composing and, you know, the technical stuff and that.
Yeah, well, I mean, yes and no. I'm not a very tech person. I kind of hate technology. You know, I'm glad that it exists and that I know people who can utilize it well, but I don't like doing it myself. So, you know, I studied film composition and film sound design and scoring, and, you know, studied film as well, and have made some short films and done soundtracks for those short films, made music videos and so forth. So, you know, I have a pretty varied background in that respect. And, you know, I've made a few short films that had some notoriety on a small scale. Like I did one film that co-directed one film that I did the score for as well, that David Lynch selected to premiere alongside the first major art retrospective of his visual art and initial short films at PAFA in Philadelphia. So that was a cool moment in time.
Yeah, David Lynch has a connection to Philadelphia. Like he lived there for a number of years, and I think he went to art school in Philly, didn't he?
Yep.
Yeah.
Before he moved to LA, he lived in Philadelphia for a long time, and from what I understand, you know, that was a major influence on Eraserhead, because the industrial nature and kind of city in decay landscape element or elements from Eraserhead kind of came from him living in, I think, pretty frightening parts of Philadelphia early on as an art student and filmmaker.
So I'm taking it that you're also a big Lynch guy too.
Yeah. You know, it's the two Davids for me that got me really into cinema in my teenage years, David Lynch and David Cronenberg. So they were kind of the initial directors that, you know, it was like, oh, okay, I want to follow someone's entire body of work and see everything that they've done. So yeah, you know, I think, and Cronenberg on a really big level for me in terms of just being fascinated by his very unique body of work. But certainly both directors were kind of touchstones in understanding cinematic language more and having a deep respect and love for cinema.
So with the film work, aside from composing the scores and doing sound design, you directed or had, you know, wrote a script, or what? How did all that stuff come together?
Oh, well, yeah, this was back in 2015, the David Lynch short. So basically, a good friend of mine, Dave Barbary, who's a filmmaker, and he actually made a Cadabra documentary about At the Mountains of Madness. When that box set came out, the 6 LP box set, he made a short form documentary about the making of that, where he interviewed Jonathan and he interviewed me, and because I did the soundtrack for that. And then him and I interviewed Jeremy at the convent, and it kind of covered that. So anyway, Dave reached out to me one day randomly. I was living in New York City at the time, and he said, "Oh, you know, there's there's this competition to make a film that David Lynch in his studio will watch and potentially select to screen with his art, because there's going to be this huge exhibit of his visual art, etc. And he said, but we have to do it this weekend if we're going to do it. And he was living in Philadelphia at the time. I was living in New York, as I said. So I said, all right, this is like a Friday night. So I said, give me the night, and I'll get back to you tomorrow. And I wrote something, and I went to Philadelphia that morning, and we filmed it. And then we had one day to edit it. And then I did the score, and then we submitted it that Monday or something like that. And then it was selected and got second place. So it was kind of neat.
What was the name of the piece?
It's called Mirrors.
Mirrors. Okay. Yeah. Oh, so that's actually on your on your website. I saw that.
Yeah, it is.
Oh, that's cool.
And then I wrote a short film idea that we filmed. Dave and I filmed. I directed it, and this it was one of those days where it was in a forest, and we were running and gunning it, filming all day. What would have been normally like a 4-day shoot or something like that, and the wind was just shrieking so much that day that we couldn't use the sound, unfortunately. So I turned it into a music video for a project of mine called Seer. That's a collaboration with the film and concert hall composer Peter Scartabello for the Cadabra Records label out of Providence, Rhode Island.
Actually, that record's pretty awesome. I picked it up at the pre-show for Nightlands.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah,
I really appreciate that. Yeah, we're really proud of that record. Pete is just a master at creating really cinematic, massive soundscapes. So I kind of wrote these skeletal songs on synthesizers and harmonium and piano, and then sang to them. And then he created this whole world of sound. And we were very much inspired by films, because I kind of view those songs as cinematic songs. They're kind of each like their own little film, if you will. So kind of drawing from filmmakers like Andrzej Żuławski and Valerian Baracek and Nicholas Roeg, Kenneth Anger, and then Italian horror films, and things like Jess Franco and Jean Rollin, stuff like that. So that's kind of, it's interesting, because I kind of, when I wrote that record and when Pete and I worked on it, I was more thinking about cinema than I was about being inspired by music. The music was all kind of subconscious.
So in your mind, there was like a narrative playing when you're writing this material?
Yeah, absolutely. I was more thinking of each song as like its own short film, embodying more of a cinematic spirit than a particular strain of types of music.
Wow, that's really, really interesting. It's a very, very novel approach to writing music.
Yeah, well, it just kind of made sense, and that was the headspace that I was in at the time. And then, Pete just has this knack for creating really beautiful soundscapes with everything from string arrangements to Middle Eastern string music to really blasting bass tones and programmed drums. He's also deep into black metal and has a project that's really phenomenal called Sky Shadow Obelisk, and it's very much inspired by stuff like Death Spell Omega and whatnot. And we're working on a follow-up Seer record right now that is more metal than anything else, but it also has continuity of the sound that is on the Glimpsing to Oblivion LP as well.
That project's called Sky Shadow Obelisk?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna look that up.
Yeah, and Pete plays virtually everything on that. So, he's a phenomenal drummer. And then he also, writes all of the sick guitar parts and so forth. So,
Now, the synth, is that your main instrument? Is that when you compose and sit down to write, is it with like a synthesizer setup?
it depends. It depends on what it is, whether it's soundtrack work for Cadabra or, the other stuff that I do for Yuggoth. Um, I tend to really like writing for guitar and piano at first and kind of gathering ideas on acoustic guitar and acoustic piano, because they're so pure. And then once you kind of have ideas flowing, okay, what would it sound like with electric guitar through delay or heavy reverb or what have you. And then, naturally for synthesizers, sometimes ideas come completely from how you program the sounds, because whenever I'm doing synthesizer based work, I don't like using or really ever using presets of any kind. I like putting a lot of time into creating unique sounds that you're not going to hear elsewhere. So that's a massive part of it for me. But I don't really like some people are gearheads and get really into effects and things like that. And I kind of hate that stuff. So I use delay and I use reverb. And then occasionally, because, I want strong melodies and I want memorable melodies. And that's more important to me than, going through some daisy chain of 100 effects pedals or what have you. And then in terms of like synth work, it's processing within the parameters of the given synthesizer and how you can contort and manipulate the sounds and then turn them into your own sounds.
Do you primarily use like actual synths or soft synths?
I use all synths because I like the tactile nature. It's the same reason that I love records and vinyl records. I love touching the knobs and, moving the sliders and having that tactile experience, as opposed to, I know soft synths can do incredible stuff. And, that's totally cool when people are into using them. But I just personally find more inspiration from the tactile experience.
Yeah, I don't consider myself a synthesizer player, but I play around with synths, and like I use a bunch of stuff on the computer, and I've been thinking about getting an actual real synth.
Oh, nice. Have you looked into any specific ones that you're thinking about?
No, I was going to ask you what's like a recommendation, because I don't know anything about shopping for one.
Yeah, I'm not this tech guy where I'm always reading about the newest synths and so forth. A lot of times I hear about things from friends of mine that follow it closely, and they'll go, "Oh, did you hear about this synth or that synth?" So I'm not up on the latest. I have a Prophet Rev 2 16 voice that I really love, and to me that's like a perfect blend of kind of analog style synthesis, but in digital form.
Right.
That you can, save sounds and create sounds easily and so forth. And, then I'll have more traditional, like Roland Juno kind of keyboards for when you need traditional electronic string arrangements and different piano sounds and organ sounds and things like that. And then I have, some other pieces that are kind of in between. As much as I love monophonic analog synthesizers, I don't really go to them frequently because of their limitations. I prefer polyphonic sound, and getting really full sound that have a lot of layers. Like for instance, at like Nightlands, when I was performing all those different live scores to all the fabulous readers, I can't do what I do in the studio where I have all these different layers and I'm playing different tracks to myself from the playback. So it's really important to have massive sounds within one sound. So you have, say, one sound that you're playing live, and how big can you make that sound? And, that's kind of a process that I'm going through right now to, maximize the potential for the Cadabra live events at the end of September and beginning of October. And then also I'm performing the following weekend again with Robert Lloyd Perry and also Andrew Lehman, who I performed with for the Lovecraft stuff at the, so I'm going to Portland, Oregon, October 6th through 8th for the entirety of the H.P. Lovecraft Film Festival. So I was kindly invited to perform 2 pieces with Robert during that weekend in Portland. And one of them is going to be The Willows again. And then we're also going to do another piece. And then with Andrew Lehman, we're performing Beyond the Wall of Sleep, which Andrew and I did a Cadabra Records of. And then we're also going to do a shorter piece called the Cats of Ulthar.
Oh, yeah.
And because there's going to be a discussion of some kind around Lovecraft and cats. So the Cats of Ulthar is a tie-in, a little tie-in and nod to that discussion that's going to take place during that weekend. And so it's a film festival, but so for people that are in or around Portland or might just be interested in traveling to some degree, it's a film festival of Lovecraftian inspired and direct Lovecraft related films. But then there's also all of these musical performances and live readings. So I'm really excited to continue to play with Robert and then play again with Andrew, multiple Lovecraft pieces that we haven't played before. So that's going to be really cool. And there's also going to be this erotic body horror film called Suitable Flesh that stars Barbara Crampton from Beyond and Reanimator fame, the Stuart Gordon films. And this is this is a screenplay by Dennis Pioli, who wrote some of those Stuart Gordon films. And it's directed by Joe Lynch. So that's premiering in that regional area. And then there's some other Lovecraftian films like Gods of the Deep by Charlie Steed. So there's a lot of things to check out those few days. So hopefully see some people. I know a few friends that will be there, so it should be cool.
Yeah, I thought about flying out for that a few months ago, but just not going to work out with like schedule and things like that.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, end of September through October is so insane. As you know, I know you have a bunch of dates coming up and shows and stuff, and that's cool. And actually, before I forget, I'm really hoping to go to your New York show. I believe it's the 14th.
Yeah. At Gold Sounds.
I'm going to be in New York that weekend for the WFMU Record Fair.
Oh, wow. That's another. Oh, great. Yeah, let me know.
Yeah, that's
for sure.
Yeah, that's going on that weekend, the 14th and 15th. And when I lived in New York for about 10 years, that was a highlight of every single year. So I always, as a record maniac, I always love going to the WFMU Record Fair. It's the best record show I've ever been to. I've gotten so many gems over the years there. So yeah, so I'm psyched that it aligns with the show that you're playing. So
I hope you make it.
Yeah. I'll be there.
Yeah, we after a lull of inactivity, we're getting back on the saddle. So it's good.
That's awesome. That's fantastic.
Yeah, we're going to be recording another album later this year too. So that's another reason to stick around home and not be on the road. So.
Yeah, so there's like some tri-state area dates and then a few others.
There's just the tri-state dates, and there's a show around Halloween that we're playing out on Long Island with that's like a record release show for a band that's good friends of ours called Restless Spirit. And then we were there.
Did Jeremy do art for Restless Spirit, or am I thinking of a similarly titled?
I don't believe so. I don't think Jeremy did art for them. So there was like some unfortunate tour disappointments this year, and so that's why there was this big lull in it's normally we're out on the road all the time, and
right.
But
the last few years have been so strange.
It's
hard to predict how to do stuff.
Yeah, so that's part of it, but now it's like we're just trying to continue or complete writing and pre-production on a new record. So it's good that we weren't traveling and touring and stuff so much.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And now you know have this energy going into the record, so that's super cool.
Yeah, I've been working on this material for a while, so it's been going through a bunch of different iterations and revisions, and some songs have like 5 or 6 different demo versions of them before we actually sit down with the band to work it out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's
you
cool.
know how that goes.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's weird because my process is so solitary. Even though I work very closely with Barry, who I was talking about earlier, and even when I bring people in here and there, I haven't really been doing it in the last few years. I've been doing pretty much everything myself in terms of all the instrumentation, with Barry producing everything. And, occasionally he'll throw in a bass line or do some kind of backing arrangement. But I've pretty much been handling all the instrumentation for the last several years for all the different records. But because of that, it's not like really within a band context. So I'm kind of foreign to that. Like on that Providence label, Yuggith Records, I did a solo record called Phantom Flowers, and it's really just kind of helming everything from writing the lyrics to singing the songs, and some are instrumental, some are not, but it's kind of a lot of different instrumentation, everything from kind of extreme sounding electric guitar work to kind of haunting synthesizer fragments and drone music, and it kind of runs the gamut.
Where did you get your background doing all this stuff? Like, are you like one of these guys who went to like Berkeley or or something like that? Like, because I'm so impressed by the stuff that you're doing.
Oh, well, thanks, man. I was kind of teaching myself as much as I could be a sponge for as a teenager. So I was just I was very involved in obsessively reading everything that I could, watching everything that I could when it came to cinema, and listening to as much music as I could. And I grew up in Central Jersey, so I was in between New York City and Philadelphia. So it was actually a great location, because whenever there was stuff of interest, even when I was still in high school and whatnot, I would go to either city and just kind of explore. And then, this is pre-internet and all of that. So it's like anything. It's like the old school way of making connections, where you're just looking at every single thing in the liner notes of a record that you have, or, picking up zines to hear about weird fiction or unusual cinema, or, kind of cult music or whatever it is. So yeah, but I did go to art school. I went to SUNY Purchase, which is a state university of New York at Purchase, and it's right outside of New York City, and that's where I studied film and film history, filmmaking, and sound design, production, scoring, things like that.
I was going to say that SUNY Purchase actually has pretty well known for film, and some of the alumni of SUNY Purchase have gone on to pretty significant roles in film. I want to say they like Edie Falco or something like that went to SUNY Purchase.
That sounds right. I forget who all of the assorted alumni are, but there's been a lot of directors that have come out of Purchase, and a lot of actors, and it's a performing arts school and conservatory, so you have people there that are doing very specific things. I never wanted to limit myself to one specific thing, so I was able to kind of create my own course of study that combined cinema and music. So yeah, that's kind of how I got into all this assorted stuff.
That's cool, man. I've always wondered about that, because some people that I know, like, are these went to school for like performance, so they can play not only one style of music, but all these other, they know about like world music and all jazz and classical and everything. And I only get to experience one tiny sliver of their creative abilities. You know, I was just curious if that was like your story as well.
Well, also like I was I was a DJ for around 10 years or so, starting in when I was in high school, because I lived the town over from Princeton, and I was right near Princeton University. And they have a very powerful on the radio dial, old-fashioned, radio station that you can get throughout much of New Jersey into Philadelphia, et cetera, in terms of the range that where you can get in, you can dial it in. So I just kind of called up the station manager one day and said, I think I have kind of eclectic taste, and I'd be interested in doing a show. And then he's like, all right, come by and let's talk. And we talked for 5 minutes, and I kind of told him the kind of stuff that I was into at the time, listening to a lot of stuff like Nurse with Wound and, some various like black metal and, like krautrock music and pretty different stuff, a lot of, out jazz stuff. And he was like, all right, you have a show. And then he showed me the board for 5 minutes and how to do things. And he's like, you get it? And I was like, yep, I got it. Yeah, I had done, 4-track recordings and things like that at that time already. So I understood the mechanisms. And then I had a show for a while, or a few different shows over the course of 10 years.
That's awesome, man. It's a great story. I for a while I was doing stuff with Gimme Radio where I had like twice a month I had my own hour to play music and stuff too. It's a lot of fun doing that.
Yeah, and that kind of, I was already on the record kick where, I was spending all of the money that I had from odd jobs to get records and so forth. But then it really put it over the edge when you're doing a 3-hour show every single week, and you're like, all right, I got to play new stuff. I got to keep it fresh. And people would kind of be bewildered or angry or just perplexed a lot of the time because, when you think about college radio or what have you, people kind of put themselves in a box a lot of the time, like you're the doom metal show, or you're the jazz show or the classical show or the experimental show. And I would kind of wrap it all up in a ball. I was, and do all of it. And, it was kind of head scratching for a lot of listeners. Cause a huge inspiration for me was Stephen Stapleton's Nurse with Wound list.
Yeah.
And this was the list that he created. The listeners that might not have heard about it, his very first record, Chance Meeting on a Dissecting Table of a Sewing Machine and Umbrella. He put together this list of all of these crazy musical projects and composers. And it was everything from like psychedelic krautrock bands playing, like stoner rock and things like that, to weird folk music, to composers like Lamont Young and Terry Riley, to, everything in between. And that was a huge inspiration on how I listen to things. And even beyond that, just like how I approach everything that speaks to me in life, because it's not limiting yourself to the confines of categories. And, it's kind of like with cinema too. Like I love kind of that blurred world that exists between art film and exploitation and everything in between, and films that, what the hell is this film? Like a film like Andrzej Żuławski's Possession,
yes.
Where it throws people for a loop. And, those are kind of a lot of the most profound experiences that I've had in my life, where I experienced something that's just so powerful that I don't know exactly how I feel about it immediately, but I know I've just experienced something important that I love, and I'm going to figure it out, and I'm going to keep going back to it. And that's whether it's, a film like Possession, or the late artist Scott Walker and his album Tilt. from 1995 or 1996, which, mixes beautiful, sweeping, orchestral, kind of classical inspired arrangements with, field recordings and music concrete elements and these very unusual vocals and nightmarish industrial kind of sounds of chains and things like that. And that's what I'm into is that space in between where you don't know quite what it is.
Yeah, Possession is that rates really high with us in general, with the guys I collaborate here at Everything Went Black, and also over at my other Necromaniacs podcast.
Oh yeah, I mean, Andrzej Żuławski's body of work is just one of the most inspiring bodies of work of any artistic medium that I can think of. And really, even right out of the gate, his first film as a director, The Third Part of the Night, it's just such an impressive out of the gate vision where his directorial style was just so strong and clear. And, like kind of like Dario Argento and him doing Bird with the Crystal Plumage, I actually think Third Part of the Night is even more impressive as a directorial debut of just kind of like embodying what someone's work would be over the course of time. And from a visual standpoint, from a thematic standpoint, and so forth. So I'm really excited that over the years, because I've been a really long time Żuławski fan, I'm really excited that more and more people have been turned on to his body and work, and some of his films that have gotten lesser attention are getting more and more attention, such as Third Part of the Night, as I just said, but also The Devil and On the Silver Globe. And they actually all came out in the UK within the last couple of months by the company Eureka. And they put out like a special edition with a bunch of supplemental features and documentaries and so forth.
Have you ever checked out that French Extremity, like those films from like the late 90s into like the 2000s, or like maybe 2008, 2009? I think that kind of vibe like ended.
Yeah, most of them don't speak to me on a big level. It's funny, like as I get older, I become a little more squeamish in terms of, seeing really brutal violence and things of that nature. And I was never really that into it in the first place. But Martyrs is a film that I think is fascinating. It doesn't completely work for me on all levels, but I really respect that director. And I think that he's made a lot of really interesting films. And it's odd because he's never made a film that works for me completely, but I really think that he's an interesting voice in horror. And that Ghostland film that he made, I love the music that was put together for that. There's a classical pianist, I forget his name, but it's just absolutely beautiful, haunting, lyrical piano pieces, and then kind of coupled with, I think, someone else or a group of people that did more like kind of soundscape work, and it kind of bleeds into each other throughout the film. So I thought the music and sound design was really amazing in that.
Yeah, that's Pascal Laugier, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah, he did Martyrs is, I think, the pinnacle of like all those movies, and I would throw in Claire Denis, so like some of her work.
Oh yeah, I love
Day.
Trouble Every Day. Hell yeah.
I mean, those are the ones that I really like. The ones that are like, I mean, especially Trouble Every Day, which is like, it's almost like just a drama with like these horrific elements to it,
Yeah, definitely. That's a really powerful kind of primal film. But in terms of like the French fantastique, I'm more into the 70s strain.
Okay.
Like Jean Rollin. He's more like kind of a sensitive, poetic figure. Where have you seen any of his stuff?
Yeah, I've seen it. It's not coming to mind, but I've seen a bunch of his movies.
Yeah, I mean, he made all of these vampire films, specifically lesbian vampire films, and they have very kind of more of a feminine energy. Yet they're incredibly dreamlike, hallucinatory at times, and surrealistic. And I love kind of the combination of poetry and kind of this haunted, surreal reality that occupies the space within many of his films. And he has all of these recurring images and places that he would go, like the French beaches that he returns to time and time again. And I just find his work very moving and beautiful and odd.
Fascination. That's the one I was thinking of.
Yes.
Yeah, that's. I was trying to like conjure up the name of the vampire movie that I like by him. That's it.
Yeah.
Fascination, right?
Yeah, it's that classic scene of Brigitte Leahy with wielding the scythe on a bridge or a moat or something like that near a castle. You know, it's like his films are very much kind of stuck in ancient times.
Yeah.
Whether they're set in the past or the present.
He also did some of the Emmanuel films too, I think, right?
I forget exactly. I think it might have been kind of like unofficial spin-offs or something like that. For a while he was kind of like taking what he could get. But you know, he had a really strong run in the 70s of really making deeply personal, unique films. And you know, even at the end of his life, he was still going strong. Even if it was a micro budget, he continued to make such personal films. So really respect that. You know, it's similar for someone like Jess Franco, who you know, made just countless unbelievable amounts of personal, unusual films that, you know, the writer Stephen Thrower has exhaustively covered in his 2 books on Franco, that are both essential reading if you're a Jess Franco fan.
Yeah, that's awesome. I got to check. I try to catch up with those books. Well, Chris, thanks a lot for spending time on the show, man. It was great catching up.
Yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate it. And I failed to. Is it okay to just mention a few odds and ends?
Yeah, go ahead, man. Of course. Yeah.
Quickly, there's a few things that I forgot to.
Take your time. It doesn't have to be quickly. Expand on as much as you want.
So actually, there's one other event that I wanted to highlight. So you were at the Book Restoration Bindery for the Pictures of Apocalypse book and record release in Haddon, New Jersey. So on Friday, October 13th, so it's a beautiful space with a lot of atmosphere. It's a book bindery and bookstore that Dominique Alessi runs, and Vignette Noel Lamont will be doing a night that's titled Victorian Ghost Stories, and we'll be covering Victorian ghost stories over time, and you know, dealing with that literature and how ghost stories dealt with, you know, things like anxiety and the struggles and challenges of daily life and things of that nature. And I'll actually be performing kind of atmospheric music in some way during that night. So that's Friday, October 13th. And it's the title of the event is called Victorian Ghost Stories at Book Restoration Bindery. And then, so I hope to see people at the Cadabra events that are September 30th and October 1st, because that's really exciting. And then the October 6th through 8th H.P. Lovecraft Film Festival in Portland, Oregon. And and there's a lot of great Cadabra stuff coming out. So a very quick recap on some stuff to look forward to. There's the Flowers of Evil, start of the Haunt series that I was talking about earlier. And then further, there's going to be John William Polidori's The Vampire, which Lawrence R. Harvey also read, and I did the soundtrack for. And that is actually the first English language story written about, vampires as we know it. That's before Stoker's Dracula. And so that's another really cool release. Jeremy Hush did amazing art for that. Oh, and the Baudelaire Flowers of Evil record, Paul Romano did the art for that. So He did just really haunting and beautiful work. And and then also please, if anyone is interested, go to Cadabra Records and check out the collaborative project, Seer with Peter Scartabello. And then I have the Phantom Flowers album up on Yuggeth as well. And then there's also some like really awesome dungeon synth projects. So the kind of subgenre of black metal that's electronic based. So there's everything from the French duo Arcanist that's inspired. All their works are inspired by the writings of Clark Ashton Smith. Then there's Radagast, and then an Italian project called Scepter that just came out.
That's awesome. That's really, really cool.
Oh, and then one final thing that I forgot is I don't think this has been officially announced, so breaking it here, that there will be a Halloween Cadabra release that is H.P. Lovecraft's Halloween in the Suburbs 7-inch that Andrew Lehman reads, and I did the soundtrack for that too. So that'll be right around Halloween time.
Ton of stuff coming out. That's awesome.
Yeah. So thank you, Mike, so much for having me on. And this has been a really fun and great discussion. And I'm psyched to see you at the Cadabra show, and then again in New York City for the Tomb show.
It's going to be great, man. Looking forward to it. And that's coming up, man. All that stuff's weeks away at this point. Absolutely.
It feels so good to be done with this horrible summer season and break into the fall. I've been trying to exercise a lot, and the last week of like 90-degree weather, I just couldn't bring myself to go out in the heat and keep, walking 10,000, 15,000 steps a day and whatnot. It's like, I'm taking this week off because I can't stand the summer anymore and bring on the fall. So it's great that it's quickly approaching the best time of the year and the best month of the year, et cetera.
I couldn't agree with you more. All right. Thanks, Chris. I'll see you, in a couple of weeks, man.
Absolutely, Mike. Thanks so much.
All right. Take care.
You too.